Here's the problem in Willits. Highway 101 is the only north-south route through Willits. All of the local and interregional traffic merge into a single lane before a major intersection, causing traffic to back up at the stoplight. 70% of these cars are local. To solve this problem, CalTrans is building a 4-lane freeway in 2 stages to bypass Willits. CalTrans dismissed from serious consideration all non-freeway alternatives even before 2002, claiming that only a 4-lane freeway would be sufficient to meet its purpose, which is to reduce delays, improve safety, and achieve level of service C for interregional traffic. Since congestion could be relieved with a number of other solutions, achieving level of service C was key in CalTrans' strategy. Level of service is a calculation designed to estimate a driver's perception of their driving experience. CalTrans engineers used level of service to determine how many lanes are necessary for new highway projects. To justify a 4-lane freeway, CalTrans needed to show that the traffic volumes likely to use this bypass would overwhelm any 2-lane alternative and would require a 4-lane freeway. CalTrans has persisted in this position, even though a 4-lane freeway through Little Lake Valley will require the largest filling of wetlands in Northern California in 50 years, loss of farmland, impacts to threatened fish and plants, and carries a mitigation price tag of $54 million. The 3 main claims used to justify the need for the 4 lanes were: local traffic will use the bypass to get across town, interregional traffic volumes will increase by 59% over 20 years, and a 2-lane road would result in an unacceptable level of service. We'll go into each claim in detail and look at another way CalTrans tried to justify the need for 4 lanes. In this letter from CalTrans to the Army Corps, CalTrans says that adjacent bypass segments attract travelers who want to get across town more quickly, and because of this, an additional travel lane in both directions would be required. In this aerial view of Willits, the pink line is Highway 101. The orange line is the proposed bypass through Little Lake Valley. This is the route a driver at the south end of town would take to access Brook Trails, a nearby subdivision on the north end of Willits. Drive 2 miles to the south interchange, then enter the bypass, travel 5 miles north, and travel another mile south to get to Sherwood Road, the entrance to Brook Trails. This would require 8 miles of driving using the bypass as opposed to 2 miles using Main Street. In this case, Willits is not comparable to other bypassed towns like Santa Rosa and Ukiah that have many convenient exits. A local resident wanting to save time by using the bypass would have to travel more than an average speed of 92 miles per hour. The traffic growth projection CalTrans used is inflated. This projection was the basis for the claim that an additional 2 lanes will be necessary to accommodate the 59% increase in traffic that will occur over the next 20 years from the year the bypass opens. Look at this graph of vehicle volumes on Highway 101 between the Sonoma-Marin County line and the Mendocino-Humboldt County line over time. The blue line is from 20 years ago and the green line is from 2 years ago. For the relevant section north of Willits that includes the traffic that would use the bypass, there has been no growth in the number of vehicles in 20 years. We know of no population or traffic data that indicates this is likely to change. In spite of a 20-year history of flat or declining traffic volumes in the Willits area, CalTrans applies a sustained 2% per year growth rate for traffic likely to use the bypass over a 20-year period. This results in an interregional traffic volume of 721 vehicles per peak hour, as shown by the red line. Applying a still conservative 1% growth rate to the current volume of interregional traffic likely to use the bypass would result in an interregional traffic volume of 505 vehicles per peak hour, as shown by the green line. CalTrans also assumes that the bypass would carry a large amount of local traffic based on their traffic modeling, which shows that residents living near the interchange could get across town faster using the bypass than by going through town. This assumption increases traffic volume on the bypass by nearly 60%, yielding a total bypass traffic volume of about 1,150 vehicles per peak hour after 20 years. As discussed earlier, one of the flaws in CalTrans modeling is that very few local residents live near either interchange. For the vast majority of local residents, using the bypass to get across town would require 8 miles of driving to travel a total distance of less than 2 miles. Therefore, very few residents would realize any time savings using the bypass to get across town and would opt for the shorter and faster route through town. A more reasonable projection would still assume that the majority of Brook Trails commuters would use the bypass. However, unlike CalTrans projections, bypass traffic would include very few local Willits residents. Applying these assumptions results in a local traffic component of about 200 vehicles per peak hour for a total bypass traffic volume of 700 vehicles per peak hour after 20 years. Using the more realistic projections in calculating level of service, it becomes clear that level of service C would exist on a 2-lane road over the 20-year design life of the project. This is a key point because after convincing the agencies that only level of service C was acceptable, CalTrans used these inflated traffic volume figures to claim that only a 4-lane freeway would achieve level of service C over the 20-year design life of the project. In the next section, we'll discuss how the claim for needing level of service C is not actually a reasonable or responsible use of taxpayer dollars. CalTrans claims this vehicle volume is too high for a 2-lane roadway. We are just north of Willits at the site of the northern interchange. This is about the same amount of peak hour traffic CalTrans claims will use the bypass on completion. According to CalTrans, this road for this number of cars has a level of service D. According to CalTrans, the bypass has to operate at a level of service C, so therefore it will require an additional lane in each direction. When CalTrans showed this diagram to regulating agencies, they agreed that a level of service D would be too much traffic, and that the new construction should be built at level of service C. Remember, this is the amount of traffic they were calling too much, not this, as people were led to believe. Here is an example of CalTrans making false claims to justify increasing the size of the project. CalTrans misled the Army Corps by claiming that the entire Highway 101 segment to be bypassed from 2 miles south to 1 mile north of the Willits city limits operated at level of service F. In fact, only the downtown intersection of Highway 20 and Highway 101 operates at level of service F during certain periods. Here we are back at the exact spot CalTrans is now claiming is level of service F. This is important because in the final days leading up to the issuance of the Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit, the Corps was still asking CalTrans to justify to achieve level of service C for this project. By claiming that the entire segment of Highway 101 to be bypassed was bumper-to-bumper and stop-and-go traffic, the Corps could be led to believe that only a 4-lane freeway could accommodate the large volume of interregional traffic that was causing this extreme congestion. Remember, interregional traffic is approximately 30% of the total traffic on Highway 101 in downtown Willits. Based on this analysis, we think that a 4-lane highway can't be reasonably justified by traffic volume. Alternatives include the restriping of Highway 101-20 intersection, building the Bechtel Road Railroad Avenue connector, and building a 2-lane bypass within the existing railroad corridor.
I understand some of the numbers about the transportation, the numbers on the highway in Willits, and it's only about 22,000 vehicles a day. A 3-lane highway, 3-lane road, which is 2 lanes, 1 lane each direction and turn pocket, can handle about 20,000. So it's just barely over capacity. You could easily divert that traffic with connector streets that would parallel Main Street. And so first of all, I want to congratulate and compliment everybody here who has identified sort of some obvious facts, because these obvious facts, for whatever reason, have not been pursued by CalTrans and others.
A rational approach would have been to start by restriping the part of 101 Main Street that is the bottleneck. I mean, that's 1/2 of 1% of the cost of the 2-lane bypass, not even a 4-lane bypass. The next step put a Railroad Avenue Bechtel Road connection. That would take at least as much traffic off of Main Street as the bypass would. And then there's also a slightly more complicated, but certainly worth evaluating, the railroad corridor truck route. And those were all summarily rejected. Besides being rationally opposed, I'm angry because I think that we have been misrepresented and we have been fooled and led along. And I'm also really would be extremely sad if this thing goes ahead because it's paving paradise to put up an empty freeway.